And I looked around and I'm like, I hate everything I'm doing. I don't want to go to work. I'm not having fun. And I didn't know why.
Hey, that was Kristin Clark, and she's about to tell us how she went from hating everything she was doing to absolutely loving her work. This is the Intentional Mind Podcast. I'm Angela, I'm your host, and we're all about helping you intentionally design your life. And I brought Kristin on the show because I really believe in her work. What she teaches is something that has truly changed my life, and I personally have taken a class with Kristin, and I just feel like she has so much wisdom to share. So we have a very awesome conversation, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it. So Kristin is a success coach. She's a seasoned marketing expert. She's a Gallup certified strengths coach. She's a mentor, public speaker, commissioned artist, and creator of the Be Your Best You formula. Her corporate expertise is in direct response marketing, sales, and continuous customer relationships. She has a reputation for guiding young managers to become great leaders, which drove her passion for mentoring young people. I am turning it over to Kristin to have her tell us about her in her own words.
I am a Gallup certified strengths coach. And at Gallup, they developed the Clifton Strengths Program. And years ago, I fell in love with this program. And I got to tell you why. Part of it was I hit that grand old age of like the 45-ish that a lot of people hit. And I looked around and I'm like, I hate everything I'm doing. I don't want to go to work. I'm not having fun. And I didn't know why. And I was introduced to strengths. And the lady that took me through it, it was funny. She opened up my report. She looked at it and she goes, oh, okay. And I was like, oh my gosh, I thought this was supposed to be fun, right? And she said, Kristin, you scare people, don't you? And I said, I do kind of scare people, but I don't know why. And she goes, well, let me tell you why. And she went on, and it was actually very positive information. But it explained to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I just need to soften my approach sometimes and do some things that, make people a little bit more comfortable. And a lot of it is I just have these ideas and I just throw them out there and I'm very blunt. So I needed to learn that, I had these wonderful talents, but I also needed to know how to use them in a way that other people thought they were awesome too.
So it's like your journey started with you learning more about your own strengths. And then you kind of hopped on this train of just being obsessed with strengths and helping other people figure out their strengths because you found so much value in knowing yours in your life.
I did. And I'll tell you, I've went on this little personal journey and I found that I was like, when would have I changed my mind? When would have I done something different as far as a career? And I got to tell you, I loved working in marketing, did very well at it, got up through the ranks and really had a great career in marketing. But I don't know that it was truly something I loved to do. And, had this passion around it. And I kind of in my mind went back a little bit further and a little further. And I was like, was it my first job? Was it this? Was it that? And I was like, no, you know what? If I would have went back to my college campus, I remember the day I was standing on campus and time just stood still for me. I was looking back then, Angela, you won't recognize this, but we had books of our classes that we looked at, right? Because nothing was online. And I remember reading about this one class and I was like, what idiot would take that class? And like I said, time just stood still. And I knew it was a pivotal moment and I didn't grab it. I didn't take the class. And I think that would have changed my trajectory. And part of it was a decorating class. And I just thought that was so fluffy and, who even has a career doing stuff like that? And I decided then and there when I kind of went through that thought pattern, I was like, that's where I want to help. I want to help the kids that are coming out of high school, going into college. They don't know what they want to do with their life. And the thing is, after working with them for a long time, what I found is they really do have an idea of what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
They just need somebody there to do the head nods and say, yeah, let's think about what that looks like for you. So, that's why I've ended up spending most of my time now working with high school and college students.
You know what I love about that, Kristin, is that It's like there's so many people, and I know there's so many people listening right now that don't feel like totally fulfilled with what they're doing in their work. And they have like this, they know that they were kind of meant for more. They feel that. And a lot of times they don't know much about their strengths. They just know that they're not living in alignment with it, or they feel some of those symptoms. So what I think is so interesting is that you've kind of taken this proactive approach. Like, I'm sure throughout your career, you have seen where people are in positions that aren't best suited to their strengths. And then you're like, I want to help them at the beginning of their career, because I don't want them to be that person, 20 years into their career being like, I hate this. I hate what I'm doing every day. Right?
Right. And I'll tell you, Angela, here's a stat that just blows my mind. And that is, so Gallup did a study a little while back that talks about engagement and employee engagement throughout the United States. 30% of the workforce out there today is engaged in what they do. So the translation on that is you've got 70% of people that are not engaged in doing something that is meaningful to them.
Yeah,
70%.
it's insane. And that means what that actually means, if you dig deeper, it's like 70% of people in a sense are almost like walking through this world like in a zombie like state. Like, I'm not really engaged. I'm just going through the motions. And then it's like, when you aren't enjoying your work, we know that that bleeds into other areas of your life. Like, you come home, you bring that frustration or that lower kind of energy into your family environment, and it just impacts your whole life.
For sure. And you know what? Those are the people that on Sunday nights, they get stomach aches and are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I've got to go do this again tomorrow. And I can tell you, I lived that for 4 or 5 years and I went, that's no way to live.
Yeah.
Um, I love working. And for me my husband would poke at me and be like, Kristin, you got to get out of bed and go to work. And he's like, what is wrong with you? Because he knows. I mean, I jump out of bed usually to go to work. And it was truly that my strengths at the time were not aligned. And it's
That,
interesting what happened, Angela, is when I was coming up the ranks in marketing, when I had other people helping me kind of with projects, here, Kristin, I want you to work on that, move over there, do this, whatever, they very much recognize my strengths.
mm-hmm.
When I got promoted into a VP position, I took it upon myself to say, okay, well, now you're a VP, you've got to be this strategic thinker. Well, guess what? I'm not. That is so not my strengths. But I didn't know, right? So I was like, well, that's the natural thing. You're in positions of authority. You've got to think strategically. Well, the answer is that's not what brought me to the table. What
Mm-hmm.
brought me to the table is my ability to get people to move forward and get stuff done and for them to work together and enjoy it and just getting projects moving forward. That's where I excel. And what I've learned throughout the years on this is that there are people around me that are really good at strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And now what I do is I surround myself with those type of people so that when I come to a strategic program or just trying to think something through in the beginning, I reach out to those people that are high in strategy and let them do what they do well,
Yeah.
right?
And I love that, because it's like, it reminds me so much of just being intentional in your life. Like, that, to be intentional in your life, you need to know yourself. You need to know what you are good at. And you also need to know what you're not good at. And then you need to intentionally design your environment so that you can thrive in that environment, or your work can be done well. And that is going to require you to rely on other people's strengths. Like, we're not here to do it all by ourselves.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, Angela, when I learned that, I can't tell you the weight that came off my shoulders when I was like, oh, I don't have to think strategically. Well, thank the Lord, right? That is not something I enjoy. Yeah.
And I have a similar story where I at a young age just kind of like moved up in organizations very quickly. And I was like the newer manager that so could have benefited from your guidance. And just like, where I'm like, wow, I find myself at 23 years old. I'm managing this quality improvement program for a county mental health agency. Everyone else that's close to me in age doing the same kind of role is probably a gap of, I don't know, like 20 something years. Like, they're talking about maybe even more than that. They're talking about their grandkids, they're talking about retirement. And I find myself in this role, and then later realizing that I really just felt like it was like my soul was like leaving my body. That's how I would describe it. Like I'd drive into work after a while, and I thought that I'd be so excited to be in that kind of role. But what happened is similar to you. I know we both have the activator strengths, and we can talk a little bit more about strengths in a bit, but I was someone who got things done. I was really good at like getting people together, making, the balls roll and get stuff done. So people saw that in me and they're like, yeah, then you can lead here. And this also happened to me in the Army too, where I would get put in these leadership kinds of roles. But when it comes to a lot of the strategic stuff, I don't have a lot of that skill set. So I would get really overwhelmed in those kinds of situations. And
Mm-hmm.
what was a gift to me, and the reason why I love the Strengths Finder assessment so much, and I actually used to use it a lot when I did career coaching, I would say you have to take the Strengths Finder assessment so that you can just make sure that you're designing life based on your strengths. Otherwise, you're going to feel unfulfilled. Like, I'm just going to be bold and say that, because I have found in my coaching, there's two things that will cause people to feel really unfulfilled at work. And I say when you're not living in alignment with your strengths and you're not honoring your values. Hands down, that's a recipe for unfulfillment. So knowing this, I found myself in a management role. I was managing a folk rehab program. And I was just like, I want to create this environment where people love to come to work, like where we're really honoring their strengths, because I know what it feels like to be in a role where my strengths aren't being honored. So I had advocated for the organization to pay for everyone on my team to take the Strengths Finder assessment, to like study themselves and to tell me like, where do they think that they could use their strengths now that they know them? And it was amazing. How I did this was like, I remember there was one girl who would love to create like binders and folders, just like super organized. And she was in a position where she was in front of people all the time. That was not her thing. Where it was like, I had another person who had the strength of woo, and we can talk more about that strength too, where she was just so good at like breaking the ice, building relationships. And I had kind of like switched like some job duties here and there with them to try to really like honor those strengths more.
Yes,
And
and what's so interesting about that is, like, the lady that loves putting binders together, other
Mhm.
people would be like, "Oh my gosh, shoot me now," right? They're like, and what I find is that managers, because they think something like that is boring or beneath them or just not fun, that they feel guilty
Yeah.
asking that other person to do it. And really what strengths helps you do is it helps you flip that to go, no, not only do they love that, they excel at that, and they're going to make us better if they get to do what they do well. So it kind of takes that guilt off a new manager too, because you're like, no, you are honoring their strengths by giving them those to-do items because they love it.
Yeah, I feel like if you're a new manager or you're just a manager in general, like it would be so helpful to you to know everybody that is under your leadership, like know what their strengths are, and then so that you can tap into them, so that you can show too that you value them and they're going to like their work more. And sometimes like they have no idea what their strengths are. So this can just really open their eyes. So tell people a little bit more about just the Strengths Finder assessment in general and why it's your favorite assessment, because let's be real, it is. So let's
Yeah,
tell us.
yes, it absolutely is. And a big reason for it is this. I see a lot of the other assessments out there as a destination. You're a blue, you're a tiger, you're a, ENTJ, and you're like, okay, what does that mean again? Right? And you're like, okay, here's what you are like. But what do you do with that? Um, what I like about strengths is it gives you words that, number one, are memorable and meaningful to you. Like you brought up activator earlier. Those are people that get people to move forward. So that word is meaningful so you can remember what it is. The other part of it is once you understand that you really enjoy getting people to move forward, you can choose to do that more often. One of the things that I added into my business is I'm very much influencing. I like to influence people, and I'm high in relationship building. Those are two of the four domains that all these themes fall into. I purposefully developed a class or a big event so that instead of Kristin sitting in her office, I get to interact more with people. And it was really important for my business. So I actually changed my business to make sure that it was suiting my strengths. And that's, I think, the big thing. And by the way, they've changed the name to Clifton Strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people sometimes get confused about that. So I wanted to make sure people, when they're hearing us call it different terms, Strengths Finders
Oh,
and
that's
Clifton,
good to know. Yeah.
yeah, it's the same thing. And it's confusing for everybody. So we'll all get used to it at some point. But that's what I loved about Clifton Strengths is you can actually do something with it. Like there's an action item behind it. And I'd tell you, like any program, you really just have to put the time in. Everybody loves strengths. You and I, met because I was presenting about strengths and then we did a workshop. People love that. You saw in that workshop, people stayed an extra half hour to chat just because they fall in love with this program. And
Yeah.
and I think that's why though. I think it's because it's meaningful and they can see that wow, I am built like that. And based on that, here are some of the things I can do to make my life better. And that I think is what's so powerful.
And that is just the key to being intentional with your life. Like you're saying, because you knew of your strengths, you're like, I'm going to design my work in a way that honors my strengths because I want to enjoy my work. And that is key to doing that. And I love strengths so much. So I'm so excited to have you on. I could geek out about all this stuff all day long. My business name is actually called Gifted to Share. I don't think most people know that because they're not used to seeing my name. They just coach with me kind of thing. But because I believe so much that everybody has special gifts and talents that they're meant to share with the world in a way that feels right to them. So the first step, like if you want to be able to do that in your life, you got to figure out what your strengths are. And a lot of times you don't even know what words you would use to describe it. And that's why I loved the whole Clifton Strengths assessment, was because it gave me words to describe my strengths. And this is so helpful too if you're going to be interviewing for a new job, because oftentimes you're asked, what are your greatest strengths? And then you're also asked, what are your greatest weaknesses? And I have coached people to say, like, to shine a light on using some of those words from their assessment. And the people that they're interviewing are like, oh, that's interesting. And, it's like they see that person has done the work to know themselves well. And I feel like that's very impressive. And then the other side to that too is when you know your strengths from the assessment, it also teaches you some of the areas that might be some weaknesses for you because you are so good at this. You might not be good at this thing. So can you tell us an example of that?
Sure. And, I think it's awesome that you brought up the interviewing piece of it. One of the things that I take my high school and college students through is what I call a strength script, where they take three of their top 5 strengths and we actually figure out how they're going to use the words from the Clifton Strengths Assessment, just the words that are given to us to describe their talents. And that's their opening sentence. So, Angela, if somebody was like, well, Angela, why should we hire you? You could very easily say, well, you know what? I am really good at getting people to move forward quickly. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. And it does give you these words, right? To say, no, here's what I'm good at. You also brought up understanding your weaknesses. And, I brought up earlier that like the strategic thinking themes fall typically pretty lower on my list. Out of the 34 themes, gosh, I want to say that of the 8 strategic thinking themes, 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
No, I've got one in my top 10. After that, they're not visible at all. So how do I compensate for that? We talked a little bit earlier. I make sure that I've got people around me that can help with that. And, it's interesting because a lot of times we will see that they'll see empathy, let's say at the bottom of their list. And they're like, oh, Kristin, I really feel like I can be empathetic. And it's empathy in the Clifton Strengths world isn't about you can't be empathetic. It's that somebody high in empathy feels what other people are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And empathy happens to be one of my lower ones as well. So I have to use different clues. If I'm railroading through and somebody looks like they're upset, I have to use visual clues and lots of times, listen to what other people are saying around me to understand that they're having a rough day. Somebody high in empathy could walk in the room and go, something's not right in here. Oh, look at Joanne. She does not look right today. Let me go over and see what's going on.
Yeah.
So you do find different ways, and we talk about different ways to use your personal strengths to compensate for some of those weaknesses. Or I go back to there's other people that you can rely on. And the more the better you can navigate this world. I don't even
Yeah.
know. I don't even know if I answered your question. I just went
No,
off on
you totally did, because it just got me thinking about how one of the ways I used to coach people to answer, the strengths and weaknesses questions, I always like target those harder questions. Even the why should we hire you? Like, oh, I didn't even realize like that's this just knowing your strengths and be able to communicate those strengths could help you answer that question that is a commonly bombed question during interviews. Let's be real. And then the other thing around the strengths and weaknesses, I would coach people to say, like, once you're aware of your strengths, if you feel really stuck and you don't know how to communicate what your weaknesses would be, what you can do is basically just say, I believe that my greatest strengths at times can be my greatest weaknesses. With ideation being my top one, I have a lot of ideas. And I love brainstorming sessions. And I just want to think and talk about all the ideas all the time. But I really need to start. Well, Activator kind of helps with that, but like I need to like implement those ideas. And I know that about myself, that I'm a big idea person. So what I do is get those people that are a little more strategic, that are actually going to make things happen, to sit with me and let's look and see, out of all my ideas that I just delivered, what actually makes sense to move forward now. And that's because I'm aware of my strengths and, in a sense, my weaknesses.
Yes. And here's the other thing that I think is important. When you understand these strengths, and I'm going to keep picking on Activator because you are, because I know it is one of my biggest weaknesses for sure. So my family, when I'm up putzing around and my family's watching TV and I'm, going, oh, we should do this and we should do this and da 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 da, and they'll look up at me and they'll go, Mom, you're overactivating. And I'll look, right back at him and I'm like, you know what? You're right. And it's not a fight. Now it's not a fight because I'm like, yep, they nailed it. And sometimes I use my activator in a different way where I'm like, my action right now is supposed to be to sit down with my family and enjoy this movie. That's my act.
Yeah.
So, but I couldn't do that if I didn't know what was driving that craving to get up and move. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
and what I love about that is that your family also knows your strengths. And how helpful is that? If you did this assessment and you were able to communicate like, hey, these are all the things I'm really good at, but then you can also see some of my weaknesses here, and it just is so helpful in relationships.
It absolutely is because you can have the conversation now. And
Mhm.
also because you know where the drive is. Like for the activator piece of it, it's that I have this need for speed. You and I are very okay with risk. We can learn as we go. Well, like you said, some other people are not comfortable with that. And by knowing that, you can back up. I always call it slowing my roll. You can back up a little bit and go, oh, let me tell you what I'm doing and why, so
Mhm.
that they can get a little bit more comfortable with the risk and ask questions. And a lot of times, like for us, we don't even know where we're going. We're just going, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes when somebody else slows us down too, it's helpful because we can go, wait, we can probably be more efficient if we do slow down for a minute and have a conversation about this. So yeah, there's just so many really cool, unique ways that you can use strengths and just learn more about yourself.
Well, it's like what you said earlier. Is like you got to take the time to do this. And this is the most important work I think that you can ever do, is to know yourself, to know your strengths so that you can intentionally design your life around the God-given strengths that I believe God has given you. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I heard you in another interview, you talked about, and I've said something similar to this, so it so resonated with me. You said something about how we spend more time, like think about parents, you're sending off your kid to college, you spend more time helping them figure out how to decorate their dorm room than figuring out what they're good at and like what they want to do in their life. And then you have, what ends up happening is you have all these students that are filled with anxiety because they don't really know themselves. So can you just speak more on that?
Yes. It's interesting when I think about this college planning experience where most families that I see, they dive right into the middle. And the middle is being, I've got to take the SAT, ACT test. I have to write an essay. I've got to do applications. I've got to go to colleges. I've got to pick one. But nobody, not nobody, most families don't stop and think about what comes before that. The whole reason we're going to college is to have a career. And nobody's sitting down and saying, "Great, what do you want to do for a career?" And it sounds so logical that that's where the beginning should be, but it just doesn't happen. And Angela, what I hear a lot of parents say is, "Oh my gosh, I'm 50 and I don't know what I want to do when I grow up." Really? You're going to ask a 17-year-old? And I'm like, "Yeah." And you know what? They have ideas just like me standing on that campus and
Mm-hmm.
looking at that curriculum and saying, decorating, even though I poo pooed it in my head at the time, I can tell you if I would go back in time, right now, I'd probably be a decorator for commercial buildings. That's probably what I
Yeah.
would be doing. But I didn't have anybody there going, "Kristin, it's okay. It's okay to do something you like to do. It's okay to pick something that's interesting to you because guess what? There are so many jobs out there. There's so many ways you can spend your time. Why would you not choose to spend your time doing something you enjoy?"
Exactly. It's your life. Like, don't you want to enjoy your life? So don't you, like, I feel like, want to spend the time to actually know yourself so you can enjoy your life more? Because a lot of times when we hear these kinds of assessments or you're going to do this work, it's like, I'm going to put that on the back burner. I don't really need to do it. It's not very important. I think it's one of the most important things because your life depends on it, the
Well,
enjoyment of your life.
it does. And I'll tell you, it's interesting because the things, so they're a little bit, sometimes people ask me, they're like, "Yeah, but how do strengths dictate what career you should have?" That's really not how it works. How it works is think of something you enjoy doing it, and then let's make sure you get to use your strengths within that. And how do we,
Yeah.
I'm going to use the word manipulate. It's probably the wrong word, but how do we shape or um, change that career idea to make sure it fits
Oh,
you?
I love that you said that because I'm even thinking now, like, just back to when I did a lot of career coaching, and I've always worked with people like after the fact, like they're in a job, and that they don't like their job anymore, kind of thing. And a lot of times people think that the solution is to always just, I need to quit, I need to get out of here. And sometimes it's, hey, now that you're aware of your strengths now, how can we shape this environment to really honor your strengths? Maybe there's some advocacy that needs to happen, like, and I know that I've done that in my own life. The assessment really helped me with that, where I had those conversations with my leadership and was like, I'm really good at this. This is my thing. Like I want to do more of this. And I just intentionally designed my life, as I would say.
Yes, and I don't think that we do that enough in corporate America, where we raise our hand and say, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
that project over there, I'd love to work on that." And because a lot of times we don't know, why we don't have the words to tell people why you're the right person to work on that project. So this definitely helps you with that. It gives you the realization, it gives you that understanding as to why you love doing it. And then,
Mm-hmm.
then you've got those words too to be able to say, "Hey, if you want to get the best out of me, here are the things that I like to do and I'd like to work on." And I think it's just as fair to say, "Hey, you know what? You've got me working on this project. I will do it for you, but I don't know that it's the best use of my time and energy because I don't enjoy it and it takes me a long time." But Susie over there, she loves doing it. She's telling me she'll, would love to take on more of that. So it's having that open conversation that I just don't think that we're doing enough of because I think there's a lot of
Yeah,
fear in corporate America.
for sure. And back in the day, I used to help people with disabilities find employment. And that's really when I got jumped on the strengths like bandwagon galore because all we really did was like we focused on what are they really good at instead of looking at, the disability aspect. And we were more about like, okay, so this is going on. So what else? Like what are you super good at? And let's make sure we find an environment that really honors your strengths. And then
Mhm.
after doing that and going around and advocating for people in that way, I'm like, why don't more people do that in their own lives? You
I
know?
know, right? Angela, when I am working with the college students and high school students, I am telling you, I see these kids grow 2 inches when we're talking about strengths. Because how often do we sit down with somebody and go, wow, you are really good at that?
Mhm.
And we sit and we talk about it and they give me examples and they just get so animated and so excited. And I'm like, man, why are we not doing this every day, everywhere? Right?
Yes. I feel like my vision would be like if we could live in a world where people like knew their strengths and they honored them and work environments were designed around people's strengths, how awesome would that be? That stat of, 70% not being engaged in their work, that wouldn't even be there.
And I'll tell you what's really kind of neat about where America is going today. Today, we've got 400 of the top Fortune 500 companies that are using
Mhm.
strengths to improve their productivity, their engagement, their culture. And it's not an overnight thing. You definitely have to take the time. And in projects like this, sometimes, as we all know, they're not always the first priority. But I love that companies are trying and that they're willing to put the effort in to have these programs now as part of their culture. And that's the beauty. A lot of what you and I have already talked about today is we keep talking about honoring people's strengths and, having these great conversations. Think about how you can change the culture of a company by focusing on what people do right and having that intention that people are trying their hardest and that they are
Yeah.
trying to do the right thing.
I love that belief too. That belief has served me so much in my life that everybody is doing the best that they can. And
Uh-huh.
I always think about given, their mindset, given their current circumstances, everyone is doing the best that they can. All right, something weird happened here with the audio at some point. But I believe what I asked Kristin was something related to giving us advice about our life in general. And this is what she had to say.
As far as a career, do something that you enjoy doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then let's make sure that you can use your strengths within that.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. So let me give you just a quick example of that. I was working with a guy. His mom gave me a call actually after he got out of college. And I started talking to him and I said, Connor, what's going on? He goes, Kristin, I can't find a job. I said, why is that happening? Well, he had gone to school to model characters in um, video games, right? And what we found out, Angela, is that Connor was high in deliberative, which
Mm-hmm.
means you're going to find the risk in everything. He's also really good at restorative, which is he's good at finding problems because he enjoys fixing them. And what we figured out is that he couldn't get his portfolio together because it was never quite right. Right? He wanted to go in and fix the problems. He wanted to figure out why a certain thing wasn't laying the way it was supposed to lay. So for him, instead of modeling these characters, we talked about working for a gaming company and finding all the things that were wrong with a game before it went to market. We're like, well,
Mm-hmm.
if you love video games and you love, how things are built within these games, let's shift gears a little bit. And instead of building them, let's look at what's been built and figure out what's wrong with it. And he's looking for work doing that. And then he also was looking for work, if that didn't work out, in insurance claims, where he could go in and find all the risk within insurance claims. So, it was more about if I get to do these activities every day, I'm going to love it. So even though, in the gaming industry, if he could get into that, that would be awesome for him. But we found something else too that suited his strengths that he's like, oh, yeah, that'd be really interesting, actually.
Oh, I love
So,
that you say that because people get so attached to one specific role. And it's better, I think, to be attached to what is it that you actually enjoy and then look at, like you said, how can you use your strengths with the things that you actually enjoy?
mm-hmm,
It
yep.
reminds me of, the whole concept of like your gifts will make you prosperous. I really do believe that. I think your feelings around the enjoyment of it, it's almost like it's a GPS that's guiding you to show you in ways that you are gifted.
Yes. And you know how you can tell if your GPS is in the right course?
How?
If those days that you look down and you're like, it's 2 o'clock and I haven't even eaten lunch yet, those
Mm-hmm.
are days that you're in that flow. And for
Yeah.
those people that have not taken the assessment, those are great indicators for you to go, why did I lose track of time? I obviously was loving what I was doing. What was that? And then you can start incorporating more, of those things in your life. And obviously, we've got a tool that you could use to get there quicker. But I still think it's really good for people to listen to, their themselves and their environment and what's really attracting them to certain tasks or certain things that they do throughout the day.
For sure. So for those that are listening right now, they're like, okay, I want to take this assessment. What, like, tell everyone, like, what's the kind of average cost of that? How can they go about taking it? And especially with somebody like you that can kind of dive into that with them.
Sure. And I will tell you that most people that I've talked to have said they love the assessment. When they really got the benefit out of it was talking to a coach, so that they can really understand their strengths. And there are over 12,000 strengths coaches out there. The assessment itself, there are 34 themes in the Clifton Strengths. And you can take the assessment. The assessment takes about 40 minutes, and it is a timed assessment. So every 20 seconds, they're serving up another question. And they do that purposefully. So it's scientifically designed to elicit the natural responses from you. That's the reason why they do that, so quickly. To get your top 5 strengths on a report, it's $20. And if you want your full 34 report with all 34 themes, so now you can not only understand what you're really good at, your top strengths, you can also understand your weaknesses a little bit better. And most people work within their top 10 to 12 strengths on a daily basis. Your top 5 are definitely going to be your most dominant. So the full 34 report is the one that I recommend because it comes with a 26-page report, which is just chock full of ways to better understand yourself. But that report is $50. And, neither of these are really, they're not breaking the bank at all.
No. And they offer so much value in your life. I mean, I even think of, like we talked about in interviews, we talked about improving your relationships at home. Like it's really fun for spouses to do together and see how they can really rely on each other's strengths and just all of that. Like there's so many benefits for $20 and $50. Like, come on now.
Right.
So tell us where people can find you and what are you excited about that's coming up?
So much. I have a business partner that, I told you we had an event, and we are working on I'm going to call it a membership program to help parents. It's called College Planning Untangled, and it's to help parents and students figure out this college planning process and really simplify it. I just think that people make this too hard, that there's so much information out there that families kind of get in a little bit of a swirl when it comes to this. And let's face it, college is really expensive. So it becomes emotional, and it costs a lot. So there's just a lot going on around that. So what we want to do is really simplify that process for people and help them work through that. So that's coming up soon. I have group classes that I take high school and college students through to help them figure out I call it help them figure out a major because that's what they think they need. But honestly, Angela, it's helping them figure out how to pick a career. And so, that's going on regularly. And if somebody wants to get in touch with me, go to my website, kristinclark.com. I make it super simple, and it's Kristin with 2 I's.
Okay. I wish that I would have met Kristin before I chose a major, before I chose a career path, before I went in so much debt, because honestly, knowing my strengths has really just improved my life across the board. This is why I wanted to share this with you. And even now in my life, I feel like I really enjoy the work that I do, but I got so much benefit out of working with Kristin recently and really diving deeper into my strengths. It got me thinking, how can I shape my work to really honor those strengths? How can I be more intentional with my life? It made me think about my husband's strengths and how we can just use our strengths together, how we can power couple it out. Like there's so much benefit to knowing your strengths, and it's super affordable to do this. So I recommend if you want to take the assessment, I would just message Kristin directly and she'll make sure that you have the links that you need. And if you want to continue into a deeper dive with her for one session, it's not ridiculous in price. I promise you, it's totally worth it to get that additional wisdom. I think it would be even fun for couples to do. You can do a group of people, and she just really makes it accessible to you. So her info will be in the details section of this episode. If you really enjoyed this episode, you feel like you got a lot out of it, and you haven't left us a review, please do that. That helps people find the show. Have an awesome week, and think about how you can use the strengths that you have. How can you honor those more in your work environment? How can you honor other people's strengths more? All right, talk to you soon.